Yeah, hi. In our continuing series of installing bushings in SU carburetors, we're going to do the HD8, like what was found on the XKEs and Austin Healey 3000s. On the XKE, this type of a bushing shows up on the 4.2 cars, but not on the 3.8 cars. I've never seen it explained anywhere, but that's just the way that things seem to be. Now, when you remove the shaft from the body, a couple of things you have to watch out for is that there are these little narrow steel rings on either side of the butterfly. So when you take out the butterfly and go to remove the shaft, be aware that you're going to wind up with a very wide ring, sort of a spring steel ring, and then the bushing, and then a narrow ring. So what happens is these go flying, because people don't know that they're there, and then they go in a panic because they can't find them. So we do supply the narrow ones with the new bushings. The wide ones, you're going to have to be on your own not to lose. Now, strangely enough, this is in fact the bushing. It's a piece of Teflon. The Brits used it by their chemical name, P.T.F.E., which is, sometimes I know what it means and sometimes I have to look it up. But anyway, you're going to take this bushing, or this postage stamp piece of Teflon, and you're going to roll it up. And you're going to take it and you're going to tuck it inside this hole, inside the bushing. Now, it's kind of fiddly, and it doesn't look very nice until you get going a bit with it. So you take the throttle shaft and you kind of tamp it down and around. Now, as you get it in and it gets in place, you want the bushing will start to look better, and it'll actually look like something. Now you're going to do both sides, and same deal. Now, one of the key things is that this edge, this diagonal edge, when it's installed, you want those edges to butt up against each other. You don't want to leave a big gap, because then you'll have an air leak, and that'll sort of shoot you, it'll be counterproductive to what you want to do. The other thing I like to do is I like to lay that seam sort of maybe around the 3 o'clock position. That way, when the throttle shaft is operating and rotating, it's not directly on that seam. Now, there I've got the bushings installed, that side and that side. Now, the shaft, which has a throttle stop on it, it's easier if you knock the pin out and take the throttle stop out, and that way then you're just dealing with a straight shaft. Obviously, when you get it out, run your finger across the shaft and see if there's any wear. This one is a second-hand shaft, the one that came out of this carburetor, but there's virtually no wear on it. Even measured with the micrometer, it's standard all the way across. So now you're going to take and you're going to ascertain which way to push it in. Where the throttle stop goes by this smaller hole, and the thing will ultimately slide in this way. So you're going to take the shaft, you've tamped the bushings down, and you're going to insert it. Now, here's where the fun begins, because that bushing sometimes likes to come and walk out. Now, once you get this part way in, you're going to take these narrow rings, and you're going to want to slip it onto the shaft. Now, the tricky part of this is that you want to bring them across And I leave the openings 90 degrees to the slot, and there's a reason for that. Now I'm pushing it in to the other bushing, and I'm holding the bushing in with my finger. Now, these guys want to slide down the shaft. Now, you see I'm pushing it down. This one comes down. Now, you walk this through, and again, you want to bring these bushing, these little collars, all the way down to the end. You know, where the slot comes in. Now, what happens is this wants to disappear totally inside the body. Now, sometimes it hangs out a bit because a piece of the Teflon has protruded. But believe me, if you don't get them in 100%, when you go to put the butterfly in, it's gonna catch on them, and it's gonna kind of mangle them. So you want them to be inside, completely out of the throat. Now we're gonna put the butterfly in, and we're sort of massaging it down into the piece. Now we're going to center up the screws. We're going to kind of slap that butterfly around a little bit till you hear a nice bit of a clunk, and that'll kind of tell you that you're getting a good seal all the way around the edge. If it's a little off-centered, it'll either jam or it doesn't have that nice metallic click. So once you get that piece in, now again, the little steel rings are tucked totally inside. The Teflon is there. Now we're going to put the butterfly screws in. Now this setup is just like all the other SU setups. I'm going to need that. The bigger screwdriver. So you're gonna bring this down just so it kind of nips things, because as you're tightening it, you know, you wanna make sure that you get that nice sound. If you push the shaft side to side, you kind of want to center it, and now then you're going to tighten them nice. Now the next part is to look in here. Now you see the bushing is walked out just a little bit. So what I have is a little old steel bushing that you can put down in there, and if you're gentle, it'll roll that piece back in all the way down to the end. Now, I do that on both sides. Now, this side didn't walk as much, but this will also enable you to put pressure on the edges of the bushing, and that'll draw the bias slot close together, so it'll butt up against each other. Now, that's in nice and tight. We take now the wide steel ring, and this goes down over, and again we use my little bushing, and that goes in, and that grips the shaft and puts pressure on the edge of that bushing, so it's not going to walk out. The narrow one prevents the bushing from walking in, and the wide one prevents it from walking out. One of the problems that we run into is when you're using this system, there's no other seal involved. It's not the cork seal like you see on the 3/8, and it's not the rubber seal you see on the later model HDs. So, but we have guys that will leave these out thinking that it's a good thing and that they're now going to be able to put put the other shaft seals in. Well, that's not gonna work, because that nylon bushing or that Teflon bushing is gonna ultimately walk out. So this thing now has got a nice sound. We've looked at it to make sure that we have good, not much of a halo. Now we're gonna take the little throttle stop that we took off, and we put it back in, line it up on the hole, and then we're gonna, this bench has a very strong angle iron edge. Now we're gonna have to shift for 1 second. Get the hammer out, and this guy, is going to go back in if it wants to. All right, well, folks, I think we're going to have to just believe that. So we're going to tap that in, put the roll pin back in, not forgetting to splay the ends of these screws. If you don't think that this is important, I can tell you about the damage that one of these screws did to a V12 Jaguar years ago. So cheap insurance keeps your engine safe. And then ultimately, here's a completed carburetor with the same, all the linkage on, the throttle stop is pinned, and new bushings are in. Everything is nice and tight. People see those plastic bushings and think nobody could possibly do that from the factory, but trust me, that's the way they did it. And they show up, like I say, on 4.2E types and Healy 3000s, all in that, late 60s vintage. This, in a sense, is one of the easier carburetors to deal with, because the shaft usually never wears. The bushing does come in the kit, and once you get it all together, you're good to go. So thanks for watching this, and hope you learned something. Thank you very much.